Hey there and welcome back to Rimworld. My name is Pete and today we complete episode 37 of our Rimworld Ice Sheet Survival series. Last time we left off after making a few improvements around the base, we also defeated an angry herd of Muffalo and a raiding party, and then we received both an interesting trade offer and a cry for help. And in the comment section of that episode you were overwhelmingly in favor of pursuing that trade. The downed refugee, however, well, I have to agree with you there. It would be a fairly risky endeavor. Keep in mind that only a single lucky mortar shot could kill both of our colonists, and all that, and we don't even know what we're getting out of it. So instead, as you can see, we have started the tribalwear production. In total we need 21 of these in normal or better quality, which we can then haul across the ice sheet and trade in exchange for 3 healer mech serums. Now the big problem with that tall order of 21 tribalwear outfits, that is going to be leather. 60 units of leather, fur or clothing go into a single tribalwear outfit, so 60 times 21, that's over 1,200 units. Understandably though, I'm not really willing to use some of the more valuable materials, things like thrombo fur or generally very warm materials like muffalo or alpaca wool. Those will eventually be needed by our colonists to make warm clothing to protect themselves out here on the ice sheet, and so the tribalwear will be made from various types of leather. And that is also where our problems begin, because we definitely do not have enough leather on hand right now, which is why in this episode I think we will butcher quite a few muffalo. This will of course produce an insane amount of meat, so we'll have to see how we deal with that, but at least looking at our corpse storage room we don't have to worry about running out anytime soon. Actually, the limiting factor in all of this will very likely be the rice, because that is what we use to make both pemmican and fine meals, so without rice our meat stockpile is not getting any smaller. Now we could of course switch back over to simple meals just for the sake of using up some of our resources, but then again we could also simply extend our stockpile a bit, which going forward is probably the better choice. Now I have not really been talking a lot about what's happening on screen at the moment, so let's change that. Due to his fibrous mechanites, which are still going strong by the way, Cambiar is heading off to bed early today, but if we have a look at the storage room, we already have 11 tribalwear outfits finished. Now one of those is of poor quality, so regarding the trade we only have 10, still that is already almost half of the order fulfilled, and we're not even done with the first day of this episode. In the late evening then our rice field is once again ready to be harvested, and as I mentioned earlier, rice is likely going to be an important factor in this episode, so we will get Cobra working on that immediately. Cambiar meanwhile has not run out of leather yet, but feels a bit trapped underground, and since his sickness also has some severe penalties on his mood, we'll get him some time outside. In the northeast corner of the map we have, or rather had, 2 ship chunks to deconstruct. The remains of those can be hauled back by the huskies in the morning. Cambiar meanwhile grabs the last remaining Muffalo corpse from our slaughterfest in episode 35. Back in the base, Cobra has cooked a bit more and is now training the huskies, and Cambiar can return to the tailoring bench. Around noon then, both of them head off to bed, and in the early afternoon we have our first event of the episode. A set of cargo pods has crashed down, and inside even more food, 70 units of insect jelly. We will haul those back of course, but they will clog up additional storage space, and they will also not free that up anytime soon, because insect jelly is very tasty in its raw form, and will therefore not waste it in any of our meals. This should serve more as an emergency stockpile for hard times, albeit a pretty small one. Back in the base then, some not so fortunate news. Apparently Cobra has not been spending enough time with his huskies, and for that reason Gork here has lost her obedience. This now sets us back a bit because we need to retrain that, and only then can we focus on teaching her how to haul. That is, by the way, also the reason why the huskies Gork and Madeline are currently locked inside of the husky stables. Since they cannot haul anyway, we don't need to have them running around, and this makes it a lot easier for Cobra to train them, because he does not have to constantly run after them. Now, as expected, storage space inside of the kitchen is becoming a bit of a problem, so let's have Cambiar free up a few additional towels. This is pretty much the only option we have at the moment if we don't want to store the meat in the main storage room, because we have officially run out of human leather, blue fur and wolf skin, and like I said, I don't want to use wool for the tribal outfits. So we desperately need more blue fur, but with every Muffalo slaughtered we will of course produce more meat, and the meat to leather ratio is also quite unfortunate in this case, because a single Muffalo will yield over 180 units of meat, enough for 36 fine meals or 576 units of pemmican, provided of course we have the rice, which of course we don't get nearly as fast. In terms of leather, however, we barely get over 60, so that would be 1 Muffalo slaughtered per tribalwear outfit, and unfortunately we do need quite a few more of them. It's not all bad though. In the end this is only going to make the process take a bit longer, and there are some good news in between as well, for example another pregnancy for our husky Ruby. And by the way, with Gorg and Madeline we now have 2 more female huskies who should be able to bear children at this point, so I think we can expect a few more of these pregnancy messages in the foreseeable future. What happens with their offspring, of course, well, let's not talk about that right now. With all the time spent cooking and training the huskies, Cobra has barely found time to resow the rice fields, but especially in this episode that is of course going to be a very important task, so let's have him get to it. Cambiar meanwhile finishes another tribalwear outfit and promptly runs out of blue fur again, so with that the next Muffalo is hauled to the butcher table. Still, that doesn't last him long, of course. Shortly after, the next outfit is finished and Cambiar once again finds himself without materials, and so Cambiar spends a good amount of the next morning hauling things back and forth inside of the base before we find another project to occupy him with. And this one was of course long overdue. Over the course of the last few episodes I have received many suggestions for it. Some of you even left entire screenshots showing what we could do, and so today we are following through on those as we finally get our defenses back up to speed. Now, originally I wanted to do something entirely different here, because I recently watched one of Yeti's videos. If you are a fan of Rimworld content on YouTube, you might know him, and about 2 weeks ago he made a video about a very interesting defensive setup, one that works very efficiently with IED traps and roof collapses. I will leave a link to that video in a sidecard on screen right now as well as in the description. Eventually though I decided against it, not because I don't like it, but because the whole setup requires a vast amount of space, and at the moment we simply don't have that near our base entrance. Still, we might adopt his approach later on in the game, and if you're looking for something to spice up your defenses, then feel free to check out the video. Now, as you can see, we are opting for something a lot more established, I'd say. With the zigzag trap layout unfortunately no longer possible, we are going with a straight 1 tile wide corridor full of traps, and of course, to keep the whole thing accessible from all angles, we put in a lot of doors as well. Admittedly, this is nothing fancy, but it should protect as well, and with our colony growing and slowly but steadily becoming more and more wealthy, I would say that should be our #1 priority. Now, the layout is not quite finished yet as Cambiar heads off to bed. In the evening then, Cobra is the first one awake again, and he immediately begins making more meals on pemmican, which hopefully clears up a bit of storage space in the kitchen and should allow us to butcher the next Muffalo soon. However, before we can get to that, Cambiar has a mining job to complete. I have decided to slightly expand our defenses over into the mountain on the left. This should make room for 1 or 2 more additional traps and allow us to work a bit more efficiently with the limited amount of space that we're given. So here we are, that is the first set of traps and wall completed. Of course, now we still need to construct a second wall directly above the traps, otherwise our enemies can simply walk past them. For the moment though, Cambiar once again gets some rest while Cobra has already slaughtered another Muffalo, and now he's spending a bit of time training the huskies, because of course we don't want to have another one of our animals lose their skills. In the early morning we can then see a well-rested Cambiar make another tribalwear outfit. However, once again it's not enough just yet. And for that reason we once again increase the stockpile in the kitchen. Our meat reserves are slowly but steadily growing above our heads, but for the time being we simply have no other choice but to continue slaughtering. By the way, this is once again one of those moments where I fear that some of you in the comments will mention, "Hey Pete, you could have done X to simply solve the problem," and I will sit back here and say, yeah, could have done that, but I never realized. I still periodically hang my head in shame for not realizing that you can actually remove thin rock roof, which not too long ago could have saved us quite a bit of work and resources. But that goes to show you that playing video games can very much be a learning experience, and of course I'm thankful that 99% of the time if I make mistakes you let me know in a very constructive way and not simply call me a stupid idiot. With that being said, let's get back to the action at hand. We now have 21 tribalwear outfits, but remember one of those is of poor quality, so we need at least 1 more. But that of course also means that the slaughtering has very likely come to an end now. And yes indeed, here we are as Cambiar finishes another good quality outfit. We have now successfully manufactured everything we need to complete our end of the bargain. And that means in theory we would now be ready to send out a small caravan. However, before we do so, let us also finish what we started earlier. The trade offer has quite a few more days before it will expire, and since the location is not too far away, we have absolutely nothing to worry about, so let's get our defenses up properly before we send one of our colonists away. Once again, Cambiar has to sleep before he can finish construction, so in the meantime we can switch over to Cobra, who can bring in another rice harvest. Then, around midnight, Cambiar is up and running again as well, and shortly after, our first proper trap corridor is about to be finished. Many more will of course have to follow to keep our base secure. While Cambiar is building, we also have another pregnancy to announce. This time it's Gork who also bears children, and I think it won't be long until we see the same for Madeline as well. By the way, because I ignored it a moment ago, yes, we had that drop of Muffalo wool, and of course it's always good to have more of that out here on the ice sheet, so for me, hauling it back is a no-brainer that needs no further explanation. Meanwhile, our first line of defense is now properly finished. We have a fast opening steel door over on the left that allows us to move through the whole thing quickly, while our enemies have to take the long and most importantly also the trapped way. And with all of that finished, I think it's time to get our caravan going. However, we will not make the same mistake as last time, so this time we will craft a bedroll beforehand, which should make resting during the trip a bit more efficient. And with that finished, I'd say it's time to open up the world map and set up our caravan. Now thankfully we will only have to send one of our colonists, and my choice is Cambiar. And the reason for that is Cambiar's fibrous mechanites disease. While they certainly have a few negative aspects, the fibrous mechanites also boost movement speed. And they do so quite a bit actually, as we can see Cambiar with a movement speed of over 6 here, while Cobra is down to only 3.5, but that's because he's in darkness, normally he would have 4.6. Still, there is no denying that Cambiar is much faster than Cobra at the moment, and since the fibrous mechanites are not a deadly disease, we should be able to send Cambiar out without having to worry about him. So let's start packing, and we'll start things off with 250 units of pemmican. I think he also has a fine meal still in his inventory, so all of that combined should keep him fed for the trip back and forth. We will of course also pack the bedroll so he can rest a bit more easily, and it should also prevent the negative slept on the ground thought. And now we'll come to the goods. We'll pack 21 tribalwear outfits, making sure not to take the poor quality one with us, and thanks to their low weight, Cambiar can carry all of those easily. He even has some spare carrying capacity left over, which I almost forgot about, so we will fill that remaining space up with silver, because maybe our neighbors have something interesting of value that we want to trade for. And with that, our caravan is ready to go. It will take Cambiar about 3.5 days to get there, so Cobra will be on his own for about a week, and we can only hope that during that time things remain relatively quiet. So here we are, Cambiar is off and moving. Back inside of the base meanwhile, Cobra is making more pemmican, because Cambiar took almost everything we had with him. For the next few hours, things then remain fairly quiet inside of the base. Cambiar spends most of his time cooking until we have a small group of visitors arrive. These guys might potentially have something interesting to trade for, and we're not done yet as just a few seconds later we have another cargo drop. Inside, 190 units of agave fruit, and that is very useful stuff at this point with our food supply solely limited by the rice production. So once again, a no-brainer, the Huskies will be hauling this back, and we can check in with the traders and see if they have something useful to sell. Right, that does not seem to be the case. Apart from pemmican and herbal medicine, we can't purchase anything here, so we'll simply sell off a bit of our looted equipment, but even that is limited by the traders' low amount of silver. Still, we can carry slightly more than 100 silver back to the base, which is of course much better than nothing. As Cobra then heads off to bed, we finally also have our third female husky pregnant. This time it's Madeline's turn, so we should have a lot of puppies coming over the course of the next few episodes. Now Cobra spends most of his night in bed, a bit unusual for him as a night owl, but I think that raid last episode screwed over his sleep schedule a bit. If things remain quiet for a few more days, we should be able to get that fixed though, and keep Cobra awake at night and asleep during the day, which should also significantly improve his mood. In the morning then we can see Cobra back up, doing a bit of cleanup around the base, hauling all of her foodstuff to the kitchen, bringing the Huskies fresh pemmican, and also merging up a few items inside of our storage room. Once that is taken care of though, we can send him right back to bed. This will hopefully over time get his sleep schedule back the way we want it to be. While Cobra is resting, we can also quickly check in with Cambiar, and out on the ice sheet he has made good progress. Even though he's only made it halfway towards his destination, the remaining travel time is already down to less than 1.5 days, so I suppose Cambiar's increased movement speed is definitely paying off. After a good round of sleep, Cobra's afternoon meanwhile continues with a bit of cleanup, before we then see him start on something more worthwhile, and that is of course the inevitable extension of our defensive structures. One single line of traps might be enough to derail a small-scale raider attack, but it will be useless once we're facing larger group sizes or things like centipedes, so with our limited remains of steel we now put a few more traps in place. While Cobra is busy, we then also see something that has been missing for a long time in the series. Yes, we finally have sunlight again. That means our solar generators will once again produce electricity, and overall the next few episodes will no longer be quite as dark. And with that return of sunlight and Cambiar constructing our defenses, I would like to end this episode a bit early but on a high note. I unfortunately didn't have that much time to work on this one these past few days. This is also the reason the episode goes up a bit later than usual, but then again I have absolutely zero time to work on YouTube for the next 2 or 3 days, and I didn't want to leave you waiting until the weekend just so you can get 2 or 3 more minutes of content. All in all though, I'd say the episode has been pretty productive. We have defenses in place, we are about to complete another lucrative trade, all of our huskies are pregnant, the kitchen is full of meat, and to top it all off, the sun has also returned. So things are looking good out here on the ice sheet. Let's hope they continue that way. And with that, we make the cut for today. As always, if you enjoyed the episode, then I would be happy if you could leave a thumbs up. And of course, if you want to support the channel further, then you can either subscribe if you haven't already, or check out and maybe pledge to the Pete Complete Patreon. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.